Our next guest is best known for her role in the hit drama 24. She played Chloe O'Brien, a computer genius who's been called one of the best TV nerds. She's also appeared in notable projects like Sweet Home Alabama, Gilmore Girls, and Legally Blonde 2. But she doesn't consider herself a household name like some of her co-stars. Instead, Lynn Rajskub calls herself fame-ish. It's the topic of her new memoir, Fame-ish: My Life at the Edge of Stardom. Lynn joins me ahead of her stand-up show in Houston this weekend. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here. I like that. The top TV nerd. That's pretty good.
That's a good look. That's a good title today, right? Like back in the day, if you were a nerd, too bad. But today, the nerds have become billionaires, so we all like them. Okay, Lynn, speaking of back in the day, theater, you said, was the only part of high school that you truly loved.
I did it as a child, and I did it in high school. I never dreamed that it was something that I could do. But, now I get paid to pretend to do things that I can't do in real life. So it's a pretty good job.
Yeah, we get asked all the time. People say, how do I make it in the business? And I always say, well, start. First, you have to start. And community theater is a great place to start. You started with community theater in high school. Your first big role was an Oompa Loompa.
That's right. I mean, yes, it's not one of my best parts because I'm not sure about the Oompa Loompa thing. That could have turned me off acting, that part right there. But I was young, it was my first part.
But there's a lesson in there, and that lesson is sometimes people, it's like just to be in the room sometimes is what you need to do. And if it's Oompa Loompa, then Oompa Loompa, right? You got to start.
I love that. Even if it's an Oompa Loompa, just get in the room.
And who doesn't love an Oompa Loompa? Can I just say that? Who does not love an Oompa Loompa? All right, you were in music.
I worked up from Oompa Loompa to Raggedy Ann. So that was a pretty upward move there.
To my point, you see? Okay, you were in music videos for Weezer and Beck. You tried comedy in college. You had a recurring role in the Larry Sanders Show. And you're also in the comedy group when you moved to LA with Jack Black, Kathy Griffin, and David Cross. Your breakout role was in 24, and you had doubts about that because you had come from the comedy world.
Yes, that was really a fun, strange transition for me because I remember the executives standing off to the side a little bit wary, like, we don't know if she's going to make it on this show. And I definitely stood out on 24. It was I had a different approach, but I think that's ultimately what made it work so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing you do in your book is you explain some of these moments throughout the book, and you explain something that I think that almost everybody has thought about at one point. When you're busy typing away, we're like, oh, they're typing some top secret stuff. You were typing away some things that had nothing to do with the plot.
You got to fake it until you make it. And I wasn't even really typing on that show. And if I did type something every once in a while, it would just be a positive affirmation to myself. So I would be saying, you're doing a really good job acting. Keep up the good work. Don't take Kiefer's intensity so personally. He's just acting. He's not mad at you right now.
Yeah, Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah, he could be an intense actor in that serious role that we talk about. All right, while you were filming, you still had to satisfy that comedy side of you. You were doing secret stand-up shows in London?
I was. We did the second, 24 ended and then they restarted it again. We filmed in London and I went out at night and I found local comedy rooms because it's always been a passion of mine to do live comedy and to connect in different places because you never know what you're going to get in different cities. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun to be in the room with people.
You went on to do all kinds of other things that made you famous. And we mentioned Sweet Home Alabama, Legally Blonde 2, Little Miss Sunshine, Punch Drunk Love, all those types of things. You had your 2021 comedy special that you came up with during the pandemic, which is kind of cool. We just talked to a couple earlier who that's how they created their business during the pandemic as well. It almost like it gave us permission to do what we had put on hold. In your book, Fame-ish, you share the fact that you say you're everyone's favorite. You're in everyone's favorite movies and shows, but you're not necessarily the top biller. But you know what I always say? That's the one who always stays employed because you always have a job.
I'm still working, thank goodness. And yes, the pandemic did give me that time to realize, I had tried to write a book about 10 years ago, and I have just enough more life under my belt, more comedy under my belt, more writing. and enough time to reflect during the pandemic to, kind of hone in on that voice. And the big theme in Famish to me is, when you get that success and you get these things that you never thought, and they're not quite what you thought they would be. So anytime we have a goal or an expectation, it always turns out differently, right? It takes
well, that's part of your lesson in your book, is you make way for life to happen, right? So many of us have these set goals that we ignore the opportunities that come our way. Speaking of opportunities, let's talk about that one that lasted for 45 minutes with Tom Cruise.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I had a part in Magnolia. So Tom Cruise plays a guy who manipulates women. He runs a seminar to recruit other guys to tell them how to manipulate women. And he gives an example, and it cuts to the example that he's giving. So, my part ended up being cut because it was an example of something that was in his head, but it shows him on a date with me, and he's late and he's messed up and I'm mad at him. And it shows how he manipulates me by the end of the date, and we end up making out on a couch. And I did that with Tom Cruise, and I'm very professional. I did very well, but in between each take, I would jump up off the couch and start giggling and laughing because I was making out on a couch with Tom
Cruise for 45 minutes, right? All right. So there's lots of comical moments in behind the scenes in your book, but you also address some serious things. So when you make room for the comedy, you can, in an easier way, address some serious things. You talk about, divorce and finding life's purpose. What can we expect in your stand-up comedy routine when you come to town?
I definitely get into relationship stuff that connects us all. I always say it's a safe space at the comedy club to let loose. Now, I don't encourage speaking up from the audience, but sometimes we get into some stuff and we talk about what's important to us in our relationship and our expectations. A lot of the themes in the book are also themes in my stand-up. I sort of poke holes in stuff that seems like it should be one way, but really is another way, like marriage, like relationships, like motherhood.
Yeah. And so instead of doing a book tour, you're doing a stand-up tour to promote your book. And as we always say, laughter is the best medicine. Mary Lynn, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. Come out to the Houston Improv on Sunday.
I'll be in the front row.
Thank you.
All right. Mary Lynn Rajskub will be at the Houston Improv this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. For tickets or more information on how to get her book, Famish, My Life at the Edge of Stardom, visit greatdayhouston.com.